Okay, I'll wait a little bit. Okay, I'll wait a little bit.
One more minute should be okay. I think we should get started.
Okay. Okay, I think I'm going to go for it then, right? So far. Sonia, there's still many people in queue, or should just go for it now?
There's none now.
Okay, all right. So good afternoon, good morning, good evening to everybody where you are. And we're very happy to have you joining us in today's forum on pfhrp2 3 gene deletions. That's on the community of practice. Presently, we have some 70 people coming up, and more people are joining, and others will be joining and watching by live streaming in the YouTube channel. So the slide you have now on the screen is a little, just a short housekeeping for questions for the QA session, which will come at the end of their presentations. The questions in the written format through the chat box will help us organize ourselves better. We would love for everyone to chime in to share their comment or questions, but to make it more practical, it would be good to just collate all those questions in the chat box. This time we do not have simultaneous translation, but then we'll have thematic sessions, which will include specific ones for language to attend to the specific needs of the members of the community of practice, which you'll hear more about later on as we present to you the community of practice. So Sonia, can you go to slide 2, please, or the flyer? In today's session, we'll be presenting the community of practice. In essence, this is a table where malaria professionals who have a common concern on pfhrp2 3 gene deletions have come together to share best practices and relevant resources and lessons learned amongst each other. We are very happy to have many people to have joined this community of practice, and the energy in there is palpable, and there's lots of questions coming through, and we hope this is going to be an opportunity to share lots amongst ourselves. The community has been created with the efforts of experts who have generously contributed to the creation of this community. And today we have 4 of them here who will be presenting in this session. I'll take a few minutes just to present, just to introduce you to them. We have, firstly, I'll introduce you to Dr. Agaba Bosco, whom I'm learning a lot from. He's an epidemiologist at the National Malaria Program, of the Ministry of Health in Uganda. His program collaborates with the WHO Global Laboratory Network to establish a national surveillance system for the pfhrp2 3 gene deletions in 10 regions in Uganda. Bosco today will share some experiences from the field in implementing a national survey. Thank you very much, Bosco, for all your contribution. Then the next person is Dr. Khalid Beshir, a genomic epidemiologist and assistant professor at the London School of Health and Tropical Medicine. Khalid develops fit-for-purpose molecular tools to study genetic and genomic epidemiology of malaria parasites. Khalid has recently led the development of a multiplex qPCR method to detect pfhrp2 3 gene deletions in polyclonal infections. Today, Khalid will tell us about the approaches and techniques used for pfhrp2 genotyping. Then next is Dr. Cheng, who is based in the Australian Defence Force for Malaria and Infectious Diseases Institute in Australia. It's a WHO collaborating center. And Cheng is the head of the Drug Resistance and Diagnostics Department and has been involved in WHO Malaria RDT evaluation programs, Gene Deletion Network. Cheng, thank you very much for staying up late to participate in all our regular meetings and all your contribution as well for making this a reality. And last but not the least is the chair for the Community of Practice, Dr. Deus Ishengoma. Deus is a principal research scientist at the National Institute of Medical Research in Tanzania. For today, I'd perhaps like to focus more on humbly thanking you, Deus, very much for your energy and your enthusiasm, and especially for your passion for all that you do. And it's great working with you. So before I go on and on, I'll let's go to business. And dear participants who've joined us in the meeting today, I've done my bit and I'll hand over to Deus, who is the chair for the forum. And before chairing the whole session, he will tell us a bit about how and why this community came about and what's in store for the community. Thank you all very much. Deus, over to you.
Thank you so much, Nana, for humbling introduction. I just say for the past 12 months, even before, I've had the honor to work with the team at MESA, led by Nana and the favorite ladies. So a team of 4 people and others behind the scene, Nana, Sonia, and Elisa. I wish I could import you guys and have you around me all the time. You are an incredible team, and I've been so grateful to have an opportunity to work with you. And I'm sure everyone who will attend this webinar and keep interacting with the community of practice will appreciate the incredible energy you have and how infectious you can be when it comes to getting everyone on board. So guys, just my hat off to you. And then to the my colleagues in the community of experts, some of them are here and others who will be joining online. You guys have been a pillar to what we have done over the 12 months. And I wouldn't want to say much because we have a lot lined up for the members, and we will let them see what we have gathered for them, and particularly to responding to the call. I should say this community of practice has been set up because of the demands, not because of our wishes, but really demands from colleagues in the National Malaria Control Program and the research community who would really want to get support, experiences, and even ghost kind of experience on how we have been struggling to get these kind of surveys done. And so all the talks we assembled today are aimed at trying to give you a glimpse of what we are lined up to be sharing in the next few years from now onwards. So Nana, I'm not going to say more than this. And if anything, I'll leave it to you at the end, because I know you guys have done more than we expected. And I don't want to be taking credit or anyone else take credit, because this is what you guys have done. And we are so grateful for making this happen. And now let's go to the presentations so that we can see what is in store and what we'll be expecting from our community of practice. So let's get started with the talks. Thank you so much. And welcome everyone to our first webinar. So I think, Dana, I'll go first, or anything else? Okay. So in this first talk, I'll be giving some updates, overview and current status of the community of practice, which we have been struggling and have been lucky to set it up. And so on behalf of the coordinating group and the secretariat, which I talked about a few minutes ago, I'll be sharing with you what we have done and what we think we'll be doing in the next couple of years from now onwards. So to begin the presentation, can we mute everyone? Sorry. Begin the presentation, I'll try to show you why we have reached this stage and what was the reasons or rationale behind setting up the community of practice. Looking at the timelines, back in 2021, the WHO Malaria and Policy Advisory Group gave a statement on the need to, on the need to address the high prevalence of pfhrp2 gene deletions, particularly in the Horn of Africa and beyond. And from there, different initiatives have been taken. And actually, the first thing was countries showed the will to set up surveys, but they lacked experience and technical resources to do it. And there was a need to raise awareness, and to fill those gaps, MESA came in to compile resources on protocols, guidance, and documents, etc. And that was in December 2021. In June 2022, as part of this efforts to get things done, MESA organized a webinar, and that was a forum which I was happy to take part of. And we aim to respond because of the deletions. And during that forum, we had more than 400 people who registered. Can everyone hear me? My internet is shaking, but I hope you can hear me. And they were from over 60 countries, and we had over 90 questions, which we have tried to respond to. And actually, from that, we realized there is a need to create space for interaction, more interactions to mobilize peer support among stakeholders. And this was followed up with expert engagement in the forum and conceptualizing the creation of this new CoP. And in March this year, we launched this CoP after a lot of efforts back and forth. And as I said, the coordination from the MESA team. And so here we are, we have our first event where we are introducing the community of practice, but also trying to chart out the roadmap of what we are planning to do in the future. My slides. Yes, so we have several activities which we have identified, and we have charted out how we think we should address these activities. So the first is to share best practices, reference materials, protocols, and all other types of resources. And through the community of practice, we are planning to set up a repository within the MESA Hub, and we are encouraging you to stay tuned because we will have enormous resources, which most of our colleagues, including ourselves, who have done the surveys, and the lab colleagues, Khalid, Cheng, and others, have offered to share their resources, which we'll be happy to share with everyone who is either trying to set up the surveys or already doing the survey. And next, we'll be providing updates on new developments, and we'll do that through newsletters and social media. And we'll gather questions from NMCPs and researchers and others who are interested or want to know more about this problem. And we'll channel these questions to the pool of experts who have volunteered to support the CoP in responding to the questions from our members. So CoP emails will be used to share responses and other communications in response to the issues which you'll be receiving from our colleagues and members of the community of practice. We are planning to organize multiple and several events, provide updates, and also facilitate thematic discussions on different topics of interest. So we'll have open forums, we'll have community practice working group sessions, and we are welcoming you to give more recommendations of how would you want us to operate in order to address the needs you have, whether physically, virtually, or in another form. So we are created a community of practice with a pool of experts, and we'll have subgroups, we'll be receiving questions will be providing answers. We'll also be providing regular support, whether physical, virtual, ad hoc, or continuous. And this will be led by the Community of Practice core group, which I'm pleased and humbled to be leading with my colleagues, Dionisia from Peru, Eric Rogia from CDC, Khalid Beshir from London School is here, Bosco is here as well, Jen at WHO, Cheng in Australia, Mateus at CDC, PMI, and the MESA coordination team, which I talked a lot at the beginning of the meeting. And to give you some updates, we have now received 178 members from 49 countries, and majority are from Africa. I'm humbled that colleagues from my country, Tanzania, have supported this initiative, and they are among the majority of members, although we have Nigerians, Ethiopians, and Cameroon. And for Nigeria, I won't be surprised because this is the most densely populated country in Africa, and so the numerical advantage should be seen here. But I'm glad that Tanzania, which is far behind in terms of population, is outmatching them. So I'm encouraging my colleagues from Nigeria step up and join the community of practice. We also have members from other continents. So we have colleagues from Asia, North America, Europe, Latin America, and Oceania. And this is encouraging because it seems our membership, the membership of our community transcends all the continents. So we wanted to know what our members are currently doing, and 52% of them are either currently involved in the surveys, and a good number is planning to be involved in the survey. Where are they? What are they doing? A good number of members are working on the protocol and study design, data collection. That's also a good number of colleagues. And also a good number includes colleagues who are doing molecular analysis, indicating that quite a lot of activities are currently ongoing. We asked them to let us know their interests and whether they have questions we should be addressing. So the top interests listed by members are implementation of surveys, standardized laboratory procedures, genomic or molecular epidemiology, ideas about non-HRP2 based RDTs, and the relationship between a survey, the relation with other survey activities, how this survey can be done together with other surveys we are implementing. Where support or expectations are based in interpreting data, policies, and guidelines, lobbying for funding. We are happy to have colleagues from the funding agents who will be providing some tips of how we can move around funding for implementing the surveys. Organizing virtual meetings and events, capacity buildings, and more involvement in the surveys. These are some of the interests. So what is in store? We are what are we doing now? We are compiling frequently asking questions. We are making a repository of resources which will be made available to everyone, and then in free access portals. We are planning to convene thematic sessions to address specific questions from CoP members. We will be doing a lot of networking activities, in-person gathering wherever and whenever possible. We are encouraging you to direct any questions or inquiries to our email that is at MESA, and Nan and her team will be happy to support you. And we are also planning to organize training sessions whenever needed. I should say that this community of practice is actually centered on providing support, not just gossipy or anything, making sure that colleagues who need support get it, whether physically or virtually or whatever. So we will be here to help and support each other, because we are based on the motivation that for some of us have done the surveys, we went through hell, and we don't want anyone else to go through what we went through. So we'll be here to help, and we welcome you to join us. We are grateful to everyone who has made this work, the core group, pool of expert, WHO, MESA. We are incredibly grateful for all the support you are giving us, and thanks to the funders who are funding MESA, and most of us here at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Also have colleagues from PMI and other funding agents. We really appreciate your support. So thank you so much, and I will now tune it to Nana if there's any housekeeping announcement before we move to the next presentation. Thank you so much. We'll have questions at the end. Please post them in the chat room, and we'll address them at the end. Over to you now.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Deus. I see lots of people, well, a number of people are asking how they become members of the CoP. There's one of the team members from MESA is sharing a link to join the CoP. It's just a simple registration, and then we'll add you to the members. And like Deus nicely explained, you get newsletters or emailing from activities that we'll be performing, and you can also share any requests or questions you may need the community to address. So this is, like Deus said, this is an action-based community of practice. And Deus, I think you could have mentioned in the last comment from Deus where he said, in person, for example, I like to simply explain that there's a team in Zambia, for example, who's about to start a survey, and Deus went in there to a day or two. I don't know, Deus, if you want to share this example. I think it's very practical for people to see practical examples of kind of things that we can do when we can do it. So this is the whole agenda of this community of practice, and lots of other experts as well have joined in the pool of experts we are gathering. So we'll be happy to hear from more people and then work together. So Deus, I think we can go to the next speaker then.
Yes, let's go to the next speaker. We'll have more chats at the end of the presentation. So yeah, and members will have an opportunity to ask questions, which will make all the efforts to respond to, and if any questions will remain unanswered, we'll address them in writing and share the answers directly and in our portals. Over to you, Nana, for the next presentation.
Yes, Sonia, can you please put up? Bosco, can you please share your screen, please? You're going to listen to Bosco now, who's going to share his experience from Uganda. He's carrying a national survey. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nana and Deus. I would like to confirm with you, Nana, if you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Very good. So thank you very much for that humble introduction. I'm extremely happy to speak at this great platform today on pfhrp2 deletion survey, particularly sharing field implementation experience from Uganda. So just some bit of background. Malaria is still a major public health problem here in Uganda. And we know that accurate diagnosis is a key intervention for malaria control. RDTs are the main diagnostic tools currently at all public health facilities. But the occurrence of pfhrp2 deletion continues to threaten the usefulness of these RDTs. Now, the WHO has recommended routine surveillance of these gene deletions. However, we know that many countries have no established routine molecular surveillance system to detect the occurrence of these deletions. What I'm showing here on the right is a map of Uganda that shows the survey domains or regions where we do parasite surveys. And these are the same domains that we use for gene deletion surveys, but also for the malaria indicator survey. At the bottom there, we've done 2 surveys so far, and both of them we have aimed to achieve estimation of prevalence of suspected false negative RDT results among symptomatic patients with pfhrp2 infections. Next, we aim to determine the prevalence of HRP2 gene deletions among symptomatic PF infected patients with false negative RDTs. And lastly, we want to know and estimate the prevalence of non-PF species, which have also been known to cause false negative HRP RDTs. We've done 2 surveys so far on a large scale. And what I'm showing here is on the extreme left is a map of our first survey. We picked our samples from Eastern and Western region. And the green dots are the samples that were discordant between microscopy and RDTs. And what I'm showing here in the middle portion of the slide are the methods that we used to check the occurrence of deletions in these samples. We used conventional PCR with the amplification of the exon 1 and exon 2 of the HRP2 and HRP3 genes, and detected them using gel electrophoresis. It is important to set these controls, which must be included in each run. The 3D7, which has both genes intact, the DD2, which misses the HRP2, and then the 3BD5 that misses both genes. These controls must come out as expected. So in summary, what we saw was the overall prevalence of deletions in 29 isolates, but those that had double deletions were just 10 isolates. Overall, we saw that actually deletions were not the most common causes of false negative RDTs, but low density infections, but also non-PF infections. So we did protocol information system and mapped the exact spots where we saw these deletions, both in eastern part of the country, but also in the western part. So what I'm showing here on the extreme right side is the current survey that is ongoing, and we are doing this in the northern region of the country in 4 regions. Here we so here we use multiplex PCR, 2 PCR, published by Greenard, and this is being done at the Australian Institute, where Professor Cheng is based. So this technique amplifies a fragment each of HRP2, HRP3, pfRDH, and even tubuline. And Professor Khalid is going to give us detail on this. So in terms of that we followed in establishing this, in conducting these surveys, it was important for us to conduct a stakeholder engagement at the national level. And this engagement is extremely very important, as it brings in the various partners, the policy makers, the funders, to really bring them on the same page and understanding and recognizing the importance of conducting these deletions. Then we identified several regions in terms of geographical coverage and priority areas that are going to be covered by these surveys. And this has to be agreed upon by the stakeholders. Next, we quantified the need in terms of resources and supplies, resource mobilization, and also now actual site selection. So in terms of protocol, because we are running a surveillance protocol, and it involves collection of samples that are not routinely collected, we needed IRB clearance, and it was important to include NMCP investigators on the protocol, consent forms and translations. And I can tell you, in terms of you are translating this consent form into 12 different languages for each region. So what we are sharing experience that we have gone through, so that you who is preparing to run these surveys can foresee and plan ahead of things. Then we constituted teams, survey teams, as you can see here on the right. Each region has got a survey supervisor, and these are very, very critical for giving daily feedback, daily and weekly. In terms of site initiations, we are meeting with districts and local councils in those survey areas. And then you have to look at a reference lab. If you don't have a reference lab, then you have got to link up with a collaborating lab where you are going to do these specialized assays. In terms of data analysis, reporting, and dissemination, it is very important to disseminate these results and discuss them with the national malaria control divisions, because they are the ones who make decisions. And if you are going to deploy alternative RDTs, they are the ones that take up these roles. So we thought that sharing with you the actual implementation experience, the practical experience we have seen for both surveys. Number one, it is extremely important to consider positioning of sites. And we gave special consideration to regions where reports of false negatives were common, but also places with proximity to areas where HRP2 deletions had been reported before. For example, you saw we chose sites that are near the eastern part of DRC where deletions had been reported. And we actually detected some deletions around there. Number two, if you're using two RDTs to screen samples in the field, in our case, we used an HRP2, but also pfhrp2 RDTs, you need to ensure results are not interchanged, especially at recording stage. And you know, we are working with very busy health workers with hundreds of RDT cassettes in front of them. So that's the point of error, making errors. Number three, it was important for us to use the right cohort of dried blood spots, protein saver. Sometimes the WHO supplies these DPS, but sometimes you may have to purchase them on your own. And otherwise you'll get problems with extraction and elution. We faced this same problem in our first survey, and we don't want to see anyone face the same. Even when you correct the quality, when you correct the samples using the quality DPS, high quality DPS, you need to do training. Otherwise, you would have poor correction of samples, like you see here. You have overlap of samples from one spot to another, and then we have insufficient blood being collected here. Number four, if you are using microscope, e.g. in our first survey, having competent slide readers is key. Otherwise, you are going to get a lot of RDT and blood smear discordant results unnecessarily, and a lot of RDT false negatives due to low density infections because poor microscopy is missing them. So what I show here is our team of freshly trained WHO certified readers who are doing microscopy in our phase. Number five, it was extremely important in our case to work within the existing structures rather than creating another parallel system. As you know, this survey uses same public health facilities, same health workers, and it is important for sustainability, but also low cost of running surveys. Number six, in terms of supervision, it was extremely important to do supervision and get daily reports, weekly progress reports, and this allowed timely troubleshooting of errors, especially with documentation, consents, and sample corrections. In terms of potential challenges, these surveys are running in a project mode. They have not yet.
Bosco, you have 1 more minute to wind up, please.
They have not yet very well integrated into routine surveillance system, but also in terms of capacity to run these assays, lengthy processes for generating material transfer agreements if you want to ship samples, but also communicating HRP survey results to clinicians needs to be packaged very well so that it doesn't portray that tests are invalid or not working anymore. Otherwise, you risk reverting back to clinical diagnosis. Some lessons we have from these surveys that we can share with you. It was very important to give some kind of motivation for the government health workers, because this is an additional role in addition to what they do. Working through existing capacity systems within the region, like Deus from the Tanzanian Institute would come and support us, and we consult very much. In terms of resources, we wrote grants, but also some domestic resources. It is important to adhere to the WHO protocol for acceptability of results, but so including NMCP investigators on survey protocols. This is a collaborating lab in Australia that we work with. Here is Professor Cheng here, and here is me in that lab running those assays. Thank you very much for your listening, and I acknowledge all the funders and the working colleagues listed here, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Government of Uganda, and the Fogate International Center. Thank you very much, and over to you, Deus and Nana.
Thank you so much, Bosco, for a great presentation. No one would have done it better than you. And I do hope our attendees have had an opportunity to hear from the horse's mouth. And it's not only a horse, but a big horse. So we'll now move on with the next presentation, switching gears to the labs. And we'll start with Khalid, who will talk about methods available to detect HRP2 gene deleted parasites. So Khalid, please start your slides and go ahead with your presentation. You have 10 to 15 minutes to wind up. Over to you, Khalid. Khalid, we were able to see your slides, and now we can see them anymore.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Let me just display the slide again.
Okay,
Right.
we can see the slides now. Yes, very well. And we can hear you very well. So go ahead.
Thank you, Deus. And
great
good
opportunity.
morning.
We hope you'll enjoy your talk.
Thank you. Go ahead. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. I am going to talk to you about HRP2 genotyping, what techniques we use, and what approach, and some practical considerations. So you can see from my slide that I will focus more on the techniques that we use in the lab, and as well as in the field as well, and some of the approaches we use. You can see that there are a few things that we need to take into account before we declare that we found deletion. So generally, HRP2/3 deletion detection involves PCR confirmation of pfhrp2, HRP2 genotyping, you can see that, and then confirmation of the quality of DNA using a single copy gene. And also, optionally, we can also do next generation sequencing, genome sequencing, or microsatellite typing. Can be included for further confirmation or to study diversity or origin of the parasite. So the question is, how can we find HRP2/3 deletions? I think before we can answer that question, there are things that we need to rule out, because RDT negative can also be caused by factors other than HRP2, HRP3 deletion. For example, RDT device-related issues, such as, for example, storage, transport, which my colleague Bosco already covered, and other factors that can contribute to false RDT negative could be parasite factors, such as low parasite density, very high parasite density, and also, as mentioned by Bosco, it could be non-PF species that also can cause RDT negative. They would be microscope positive, but they would give RDT negative in HRP2 based RDT. So we need to rule out these parasite and device-related factors before we proceed with the genotyping of HRP deletion. We are mainly interested in the percentage of RDT negative caused by HRP2, HRP3 deletion. So we're not interested in all HRP2 deletion. If we want to estimate the percentage of deletion that cause RDT, so that impacts the policy, which is the threshold of 5%. So we're not interested in all HRP, even though we're going to do analysis of all HRP2 deletion, but we're only interested on the deletions that are causing HRP RDT negative. So this is also an important point to bear in mind. So the best way to find HRP2/3 deletion causing RDT negative is through prospective field surveillance, such as what Bosco explained previously. And this would help us generate phenotype data, which is microscopy data and RDT data. These two data can help us decide whether we have a case for genotype of HRP2 deletion. So the microscopy and RDT discordant could be included in the analysis together with a subset of HRP microscope positive and a subset of microscope and RDT negative. And then we do the genotyping to estimate RDT negative caused by HRP2 or 3 deletion. What if we don't do, or we haven't done any prospective surveillance? For example, in cases where we don't do systematic surveillance purposely for HRP2, such as, for example, therapeutic efficacy study, perennial malaria chemoprevention, or SMC samples, we can use the antigen screening method to produce HRP phenotype data. And then using that, we can also do the genotype data. We can link both to decide how many of the HRP2 deletions are present and also the antigen absence. And then we can link the antigen absence with the HRP2 deletion to inform the prevalence of HRP2 deletion that are causing RDT negative. So the common methods that are available are the old method, which is the nested PCR, and also the quantitative PCR. These two methods are validated and widely used by WHO network. We also have newly emerging methods such as digital PCR and also amplicon sequencing. So today I will cover both the validated ones, but the digital PCR and amplicon PCR sequencing are very promising. They need to be optimized and they require validation, both of them, before we can implement them into routine use. So the nested PCR is usually done when we have the microscope and RDT results. The first PCR test we do is the 18S-DNA. So I'm not going to go into detail, but I can show. I'm showing you that the first PCR positive, and then we do the HRP3. If they give us negative, and then we do additional PCR using 2 separate single copy genes to ensure that the quality of DNA is good. And then we can declare that we have HRP2, HRP3 deletion. So if for those of you who want to read more on nested PCR, there is a paper led by Cheng. You can read that paper in detail. So for the quantitative PCR, we use a 4 set of primer targeting human gene and 3 parasite genes in 1 tube, all of them, and then all reagents are added in 1 tube, no second round of PCR. And then you get a result similar to what I'm showing you. I'm not going to go in detail for each one, but I just want to highlight that in case there is no deletion, we expect all PCRs to be positive, all targets to be positive. If there is no deletion, again, the human and the parasite LDH should be positive. If we don't have any parasite, still the human need to be positive. In cases where the human is negative, then it's invalid. We need to repeat the experiment. So this is all done in 1 tube, and we get our amplification curve. From that amplification curve, we can create our CT values. Based on that, a decision automatically can be done whether there is a deletion or not. So in summary, you can see that the nested PCR has got multiple PCR steps and multiple genes separately done, PCR1 and 2, and then you had to do gel electrophoresis. But this is useful in areas where there is no sophisticated machinery, such as a qPCR machine. But if qPCR machine is available, it's preferable to do qPCR because of the speed with which you can get your result, and also the deletion call can also be automated to avoid any error. So you can see, for example, in this slide that some pipetting errors, PCR inhibition, and contamination can be introduced during the nested PCR, and it also takes very long time. With a qPCR, all the internal controls, such as the human DNA, can help us detect error and PCR inhibition, and below 2 hours, we can get our result. So preferably, we would use qPCR, but in areas where you don't have access, nested PCR is fine, as long as you do a proper optimization and validation, and you have all the controls required to declare your HRP2 deletion calls. And then if you want to read more about the different types of methods available for HRP2 deletion genotyping, you can have a look at this paper, and we include all the nested PCR, qPCR, digital PCR, any other emerging technologies. And then finally, I think for any qPCR or nested PCR, digital PCR, and polycomb PCR we use, we need to make sure that we have these practical considerations, including, for example, optimization. We need to make sure that we have the assay repeatability and reproducibility in your lab. So it's not acceptable, for example, that we copy the protocol from some publications and immediately use it for our samples. We need to do an internal assessment of optimization. And if there is any new assay, we need to do validation before we use it with our samples. And also we need to include positive controls, internal controls, and negative controls to ensure that we have a quality check at every step of the reaction we do, whether it's a DNA extraction or about PCR in different steps that we do. And then finally, my colleague, Professor Cheng, is going to explain more, but also it's vital that we participate in WHO and ITQA, which ensures that the quality of data that we generate in our lab is high quality. And because it impacts diagnostic policy, we need to make sure that we're generating a very high quality results. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer now or through the MESA Forum or through my email. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Khalid. Wonderful. We will now proceed with the next presentation. We are gathering all the questions. Please be assured that we will have time to respond. We are doing well in terms of time. It's now a pleasure to invite Professor Cheng to be able to do the final presentation. Cheng, please.
Yeah. Can you see my slide? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Great. Hello, everyone. So today I'll give a brief introduction to the WHO International Laboratory Network to support countries for HRP2/3 deletion surveillance. So recognizing country malaria programs do not routinely conduct molecular tests for case management and surveillance, and also due to the complexity and the cost of the molecular tests to confirm gene deletions, WHO has established a geographically diverse network of laboratories to conduct molecular analysis and serological analysis to confirm gene deletions to support country survey teams. This is to ensure that country programs would receive high quality data quickly to inform country malaria diagnosis policy. So the network was established in 2017. It currently has 7 laboratories, and 2 further laboratories are under consideration. So all laboratories have extensive experience in characterizing HRP2/3 deletions, have laboratory resources, participate the WHO nucleic acid amplification testing external quality assurance programs, and also accept the terms of reference of the network. Requests for laboratory support should usually come through the WHO, and WHO will connect country programs with a laboratory in the network. The molecular analysis conducted under a tripartite agreement between the WHO, the lab, and the survey country MOH. WHO does have some fundings to support molecular and serological analysis for the labs. And some of the labs also have their own funding sources. So if you require laboratory support, please contact WHO to be directed to a lab, preferably at planning stage, so that agreement and also IRB approvals can be obtained in time for the survey to start. So please either contact Dr. Andrea Bosman at the WHO, or contact me temporarily until a replacement for Dr. Jane Cunningham is identified. So here's the list of laboratories in the network. So top 7 laboratories are the current members, and the bottom 2 laboratories are under consideration to be included in the network. You can see there the labs are distributed in different continents, and all laboratories have the capacity to perform molecular analysis to confirm gene deletions using one of the or various methods that Khalid described earlier. And most laboratories also perform serological analysis to confirm that there's lack of HRP2 expression in the deleted samples. And all laboratories also could offer additional molecular tests, including such as determining MOI, the multiplex of infection, as well as K13 mutations. So for quality assurance, as Khalid mentioned earlier, all members of the laboratory must join the WHO EQA scheme for malaria nucleic acid amplification testing scheme. The scheme was set up in 2017 by the WHO to monitor and evaluate the performance of molecular-based tests in laboratories where molecular diagnosis of malaria is performed. So as of 2020, 57 labs joined the scheme. So for each year, the scheme will send out 2 batches of dried blood spots and lyophilized whole blood with parasite densities between 0.05 to 2,000 parasites per microliter. Yeah, so each lab will receive these batches twice a year, and the lab will conduct molecular analysis for malaria species and report your results online. And then your the lab performance will be given a score. And for the labs included in the HRP2 deletion network, we also have to report gene deletion results for any PF positive samples. So if you require more information on this scheme, please visit the WHO website. And there's also publication by Dr. Jane Cunningham in Malaria Journal. So all labs are welcome to join, are encouraged and welcome to join the WHO NIAT EQA scheme. So here's the website that you can, here's the email address that you can write to and apply to join the scheme. All right, I'll stop here and happy to take questions.
Thank you so much, Prof. Hygiene, for the great presentation. Thanks everyone, particularly all the presenters for wonderful presentations. And we will now proceed to Q&A, and we encourage everyone to send the questions to the chats. And in case we have some time, we can allow one or two colleagues to ask their questions. To get started, in the interest of time, I will ask the questions which were sent when we were registering for the forum. And these were from Supriya Sharma in India and Maria Zanga in Tanzania. And they wanted to know if there is any relationship between HRP2 gene deletion and drug resistance. So are there any relationship between drug resistance and HRP2 gene deletion? Could the deletions of HRP2 gene be associated with artemisinin drug resistance among parasite isolates? And what is the foreseeable impact of deletion of HRP2 gene deletion on emergence and spread of artemisinin resistance? Pitsam, who is our 2022 McGee Fellow, has offered to help respond to these questions. Khalid, Cheng, and I, who are here, will also offer additional answers. So Pitsam, please unmute yourself and help us with some answers.
Thank you, Deus. Thank you for inviting me. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. My honest answer to the question is, we don't have evidence to really address this so far, but I would like to describe some of the findings which are already in literature and based on what we are doing currently here in my team. Okay, so Tim Anderson's team from Texas recently has done a lab-based study using Malarian parasites, and they introduced HRP2 gene deletion with CRISPR-Cas technology. And they observed the gene deletion cause so it causes a cost. So there is a survival disadvantage from the gene deletion. So they compared it with drug resistance mutation extent. And recently also Jeff Bailey's team, the first author is Agaba Fola, they have done a study on samples collected from Ethiopia, and they tried to see if there is any association between HRP2 and 3 gene deletion and the R622I mutation in the Kelchi gene, which is circulating mainly in the Horn of Africa. So the evidence they got is they co-occur in some of the settings, but there is no evidence that supports one comes after the other, or if there is some synergistic effect between the two. But recently we completed a study in a city called Dredoa in eastern part of Ethiopia following a malaria outbreak last year this time. And the outbreak was found strongly linked with the invasive mosquito Anopheles stephensi. And the outbreak happened mainly in two settings in the city. One is in the general community, and the other was in the university campus. So in Ethiopian system, university students live within a campus. So they have like all their study and dormitories. And the parasite clones we detected in the university, which were linked to be transmitted by the invasive Anopheles stephensi, they were all found to have HRP2 deletion and HRP3 deletion, and they were all R622I mutated. But when we looked into the population in the community, in the same city, we didn't find evidence of HRP2 deletion and R622I mutation. So this is evolving, and this is the evidence we have. And we continue digging this because from the Tim Anderson's work, one of the argument was the mathematical modeling, which indicated that it was the RDT which has selected these parasites to expand in this specific setting, mainly in the Horn of Africa, is not supported by their observation in the lab. So one of the hypotheses we had in my team, and which I discussed with Cheng and Khalid Beshir last year during the BMGF meeting here in Addis, was if there is any transmission advantage or disadvantage for this parasite, because we have some evidence on drug resistance mutations causing, making parasites to invest more on transmission stage than on replication within the host. So they tend to produce more gametocytes and transmit when they are under drug pressure. So we took that hypothesis, and then we recruited patients, and then we used their blood to feed to mosquitoes. And then we have the membrane feeding experiments, and we dissected mosquitoes for oocyst stage. And so we have some evidence. The data is not yet completed. We are sequencing the samples, and we genotype the parasites with using digital PCR. And now we are completing sequencing of the infection within the parasites, the sporozoite stage, to see if there is like preference of transmission of specific clones in mixed infections like HRP2 deleted and wild type parasites. So this is still ongoing. So there is no perfect answer to this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lisa. I'm not sure if we would have anyone else better positioned to answer than you, Lisa. And thank you for sparing time to be with us. We are happy to let you go. We would wish to have you till the end of our webinar. So the next will be, we want to hear from Cheng and Khalid, if you have any additional points on that before we move to the next question. So over to you, Cheng, and then Khalid.
Yes, I agree with Fichum. So Khalid and I have collaborated with MOH Eritrea. We also looked at the relationship between HRP2 3 deletion and drug resistance. But I have to say firstly, there are three major possible selection driving forces for the HRP2 3 deletion. And the first is the RDT usage. And second is probably gene flow. And the third is drug resistance. So in Eritrea, I must say our survey results have shown that clearly the major driving force is the RDT use. The country, I wish one of the MOH guys from Eritrea is here. So the country introduced RDT in 2006, and they started seeing false negative results in 2014. And then they had to switch. The prevalence of false negative results was so high that they had to switch to non-HRP2 RDTs in 2016. So in 2019, a survey was done. This is 2.5 years after the cessation of the HRP2 RDT use. And what we see in the second survey is the prevalence of gene deletions have significantly decreased. And also at the same time, the genetic diversity of the parasite increased. So this suggests that after removal of the selection pressure from RDT, the parasite has changed. So that shows, indicate that RDT use is a strong selection driving force. In Peru, however, the driving force is quite different because Peru doesn't use malaria RDT very widely, so they still rely on microscopy. So for many years, we didn't understand how and why HRP2 deletion first appeared in Peru and reached such a high prevalence. We did a survey in collaboration with number 6. We had samples from 2011 to 18. And what we found was the rapid rise of HRP2/3 deletion prevalence coincided with an introduction and rapid expansion of a single clone of parasites, which happened to carry double HRP2 and 3 deletion. So it's really because of this new strain that we introduced into an area where the community have no immunity to it. So that was the major driving force in Peru. Now, also coming back to Eritrea, the second driving force could be drug resistance, because what Khalid group and my group, we have found that there's enrichment of K13 mutation in the HRP3 deleted and the double HRP2/3 deleted parasite population. So in Eritrea, we would probably see it's more likely that the drug resistance would have occurred after the HRP2 deletion, because the HRP2 deletion prevalence is much higher than the K13 mutation. So now, which one drives which, we're still trying to work out. But yeah, my opinion is the gene deletion occurred first.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Khalid, do you have anything to add in a minute? We need to move to the next question.
No, just to add one point. I think in addition to finding K13 mutations, particularly 62I, more likely to be found in HRP3 deleted parasite. In addition to that, there is also a mechanism unknown. So HRP3 and K13 are located in the same chromosome. So at the moment, we're trying to understand what is the mechanism of this deletion and the mutation, whether they have a similar or common mechanism that is affecting both of them. This is something that we're looking at the moment, and stay tuned for any new findings.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ali. Thanks for a great clarification. We'll now move on. We have a question from Mathis Moussaz from Belgium, and the question goes to Bosco Agaba. Bosco, what is the selection criteria for HRP2 gene deletion genotyping in Uganda, conventional or qPCR? Which samples are considered suspicious? You use the two different RDTs. Did you use the two different RDTs, or you have both RDT and microscope for diagnosis? So Bosco, please address the question.
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. So the type of genotyping we use depend at least for our two previous surveys, depends on which one is valuable for us and which one is cheaper in terms of cost. So in our first survey, we adopted and used the conventional PCR, nested PCR. But in our second survey, we found that the Q quantitative multiplex PCR is actually cheaper. So first survey, conventional, and second survey, Q PCR. The second part of the question is how do we select samples for genotyping? So in our first survey, we used HRP2 RDTs and blood smear microscopy. So samples that were negative on HRP2 RDTs, but positive on microscopy were the samples that we targeted. And they are still the samples we look out for. Thank you.
Thanks, Bosco. And maybe for the interest of our audience, the comparator can be microscopy or a non-HRP2 RDT. In the survey we did in Tanzania, we used a non-HRP2 RDT, that the PF-specific LDH, and that was the comparator. And any sample that was positive on the comparator but negative on the HRP2 gene deletion was suspicious and expedited for detection of the deletions. So thank you.
Yes, that is what we used in our second survey. Sorry for that.
Yeah, it's okay, Bosco. We have another question for you, Bosco, from Regina Rabinovich from US. And she wants to know, as different types of diagnostics are introduced or piloted, does the national system have a way to distinguish which is being used where and based on their reporting structure? That's for you, Bosco, as well.
Yeah, so for the, I'm based here at the National Malaria Program. So we have pockets in Eastern Uganda, for example, where gene deletions have been detected, but they are still below the 5% cutoff that is recommended for switch to alternative RDTs. However, we have developed guidelines for targeting those specific pockets and introduced a non-HRP2 RDTs. So I want to tell you that there is still a challenge with the distribution system. Sometimes they distribute these RDTs in areas that have not received training, but also so that affects their use. So there is still a problem with targeting those RDTs to specific areas where they are supposed to go. So the system for distribution, but also the reporting in terms of where these deletions are happening. But also, I think, Dr. Deus, you might have an answer to that in terms of the Tanzanian experience.
For us, we are actually using PAN RDTs, PFPAN, but the problem is we tend to have multiple RDTs at the same time. So at the moment we have about BioLine, and then we can have other types of other brands. So they are concurrently used. But whenever we do the surveys and our studies, we tend to record what type of RDTs are actually in use. So we generate that information, and we also monitor. In the analysis we are looking at how these different types of RDTs are performing. So compare SD BioLine, Abbott BioLine, fast response, and all those kind of RDTs to see how they are performing. And we are now doing a sensitivity analysis to be able to tell whether PLDH RDTs could be a better option in case HRP2 RDTs fail. And we have those results, and we'll be sharing them in our publications. And also we have shared the results with the WHO and the Ministry of Health for decision making. So thank you, Bosco.
But how is the distribution system? How is the distribution system? Is it?
It's centralized. In Tanzania, all medical devices and medicines are procured by the Central Medical Stores Department and distributed to the level where health facilities can order and get their supplies refilled to the facility. Although sometimes they get problems, but the system is working pretty well. Okay, Bosco, thank you so much. We need to move to another interesting topic. And we have questions from two colleagues, one from one of my best friend and the person who worked together, Norbert Peshu from Kenya. And also the same question from a friend from Cameroon, NMCP Cameroon, Raymond Tabue. And they are asking to know, are there funds to help countries carry out HRP2 gene deletion surveillance activities? And is there any funding to support surveillance activities that countries can go for? So to answer these questions and have some ideas how colleagues in the community of practice and National Malaria Control Program can go around this, we have our colleagues from some of the biggest funders, the Gates Foundation and PMI. Esther and Mateus, please. We'll have Esther go first, and ladies first, and then Mateus will go next. And if required, we can have inputs from any other colleague online, particularly who is from a funding agent, on how colleagues can access funding support for the activities they are planning in country. So over to you, Esther, if you can open your mic and tell us what probably could be made available to colleagues who are struggling to get funding.
Great. Well, thank you very much to Deus and all the other colleagues for fantastic presentations, and also to MESA Malaria for organising and hosting this community of practice I think it's an amazing resource. In terms of funding, I mean, we have provided some funding for HRP2/3 deletion surveillance studies over the past few years. It's now becoming clear that the main problems really are in the Horn of Africa. So we are mainly focusing our new funding in this area on that region. However, we are also supporting regional genomic surveillance laboratories throughout the continent, and we would encourage people either to collaborate directly with those. So they include people like Dauda Ndaye in Senegal, Fitsum Tades in Ethiopia, Deus Ishengoma in Tanzania, and Isabella Oyer in Kenya. I'm also aware that WHO does have some funding available, and Cheng went through how to apply for that in her presentation. So at the moment, we're not looking to fund any new HRP2/3 deletion surveillance projects outside the Horn of Africa, but obviously we continue to fund malaria genomic surveillance more widely across the continent. Over.
Thank you so much, Esti. And we are glad that you have attended our webinar and contributed enormous. Thank you so much, Esti. We hope you keep the support you're providing to our team. And thank you for buying into our vision of how we get people to support each other in a community that is tackling a big problem, but we hope together we can do something. Thank you, Esti. Over to you, Mateus. Mateus, are you there? Can anyone at MESA check if we have Mateus? In the meantime, I will ask Bosco and Cheng if they have anything they can say about funding. So let's start with Cheng.
I'd just like to say that WHO not only have some fundings for laboratory analysis, it does also fund RDTs for screening in your survey. So, but I think the protocol needs to be approved by the WHO before the funding is RDTs is provided.
Thanks so much, Cheng. I think once the WHO system is operating the way it was, I can say we had a lot of support from Jane and her team, and we hope WHO will learn pretty fast to reestablish the support, given that many more countries are developing interest and want to do the survey. So we will appreciate if that can happen. And from our experience, we had funding support from WHO with RDTs and filter papers. And we also had a lot of support from colleagues, other colleagues, and including the Gates Foundation that funded our surveillance protocol. And we were able to cover everything that the protocol demands. And that's why at the moment in Tanzania, we are proceeding with HRP2 surveillance through like targeted initiatives in areas where we have pockets of single deleted parasites, either HRP2 or HRP3. So that's the strategy we are now adopting. We are funded by the Gates Foundation, but we hope to be getting funding from other sources to make sure that the surveillance now, which is ongoing and longitudinal, is sustained. Over to you, Bosco, if you have anything to say about funding.
Yeah, so our first survey that covered 48 districts was from the Fogate International Center, and this funding, I think, is already is still available but for competition. So our second survey is being funded by the Gates Foundation. Estu was very right. So they availed some money that covered our survey in the current 4 regions. But also very, very important for countries to note is that the Global Fund grants are now open to support some of these surveys. And we have actually included, we have proposed to conduct a national surveillance for HRP2 in our current grant that is still ongoing.
That's great information, Bosco. Thank you so much for making that available to all of us. So we would encourage colleagues to speak to the program and program officers to make sure that HRP2 gene deletion is included in their global fund applications, because we still have so many countries where surveys have not been done, and it will be a pleasure and a great contribution of this community if we can support colleagues to do the surveys. Let's move to the next questions. A question from Anthony Jala from Mali and Edmond Bernard from Tanzania. The question goes to Khalid, and this is about the cost of techniques. So Khalid, in case of antigen screening, what is the cost per sample as compared to qPCR, and how cost differences is when someone uses nested qPCR and qPCR in detection of deletions? So Khalid, I hope you can simplify it for many people to understand, but please respond in the next, if you have 1-2 minutes, Khalid.
So I think the short answer is I don't have the figures for each assays, but I think the cost in terms of instead of looking at it only in terms of the reagents, we need to look at it the overall value of the assays. For example, normally the nested PCR is the cheapest because it doesn't involve specialized technology or enzymes. However, the process you do, the time that it takes, the value you get from it is less compared to, for example, qPCR or other genotyping methods and antigen screening as well. However, I think we can get you through the MESA Forum. We can get you the exact sample cost per sample for each of the assays.
Thank you, Khalid. I think that would be a smart way to address this. Let's get this cost per sample, and the MESA team will gather that information and put that in our resources so that anyone trying to do the laboratory analysis can be aware of the different methods and the limitations as well as the cost. So thank you so much, Khalid. We'll move on to the next question, a short question from Maria Zanga from Tanzania, and Bosco and I will address it. Is it possible to combine HRP2 gene deletion surveillance with drug resistance surveillance? I think it's possible. In my opinion, Bosco will have is because these are parasite samples. So we can look at the combined analysis for HRP2 gene deletion and drug resistance surveillance. It's all about the method and what genes you'll be targeting and the type of method you'll be using. Bosco, if you have anything to add on this, and Mateus as well, you are welcome to add on that. Bosco, do you have anything to add? I think Bosco is lost. We will probably come back to it.
Deus, can I just say something on that?
Okay, please.
I think you're right. We can use one survey for both, but it also depends on what question we want to answer. For example, if we're interested to find out whether any mutations in finding K13 are associated with any phenotype, then a separate clinical efficacy study would be better for K13 surveillance. Over.
Thank you so much, guys. We are probably coming to an end. We have a colleague, Laura Dembele, who had a hand up, and we think maybe in 30 seconds he might have something to say. So, Laura Dembele from Mali, you had your hand up for a long time, and we are sorry we couldn't give you a chance. We have a minute for you. Please unmute yourself and ask your question, and then we can respond if needed, or we'll put the answers in the chat. Laura, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you, Des.
My
question is basically to Cheng. And I'm glad to see her since like 2016. I have seen her in Australia. So the question is basically the WHO is now distributing simple for proficiency testing, like for the HPR2 and 3 delation as well for parasitemia. but the distribution is without the standard control, simple. It's only test simple. My question is, it's not really a question. It's just to have his comment on that.
So, Cheng, if you can respond in 30 seconds, please.
Yeah, I think the scheme, the purpose of scheme is really originally set up for evaluating performance of Plasmodium species detection. So now it's incorporating the HRP2 deleted strains in the dispatch. So it's up to the lab to either detect or miss it. So yeah, there's no internal control to be distributed at this stage.
Okay, thank you so much, Cheng. We have come to the end of our webinar. Before we wind up, I'll give 30 seconds to each of the presenters to sum up. So we'll start with you, Cheng. 30 seconds, please.
I think this is a great platform for countries and researchers and funders to get together to really conduct good surveillance of false negative RDT results caused by HRP2/3 deletions. We'll continue to communicate through this platform.
Thank you so much, Khalid.
Yeah, I think I agree. Very nice platform to bring everyone together. I think we should continue this kind of forum. At the same time, I think the members should submit any questions or comments they have through the MESA Forum. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Khalid. Bosco.
Thank you, Deus. I think it's definitely a very good platform, especially for us, the National Malaria Control Programs, and my fellow colleagues who from the NMCPs who are online. This is an excellent platform, especially tapping from expertise from these great brains. So I think it's very nice for sharing experiences. Some of us have gone through the hurdles and field challenges, and therefore it provides an opportunity for us to share with you people who are still planning to conduct these surveys. Thank you very much, people, for organizing such a good forum.
Thank you all, and thanks to my fellow presenters. What an amazing event. I'm so excited and humbled that we made it, so we should make many more of these meetings. And the CoP, which we have launched today, and seeing what's able to do from now onwards will be your go-to platform where we can get updates and information on what is happening, above all, provide technical support of whatever nature to anyone who is struggling or interested in doing the surveillance. I will now hand over to Nana for final housekeeping announcements and closure of our event. Thank you so much, and I hope to see you in our next event. So over to you, Nana.
Thank you very much, Deus. Thank you, Khalid, Bosco, and Cheng, and to all the other people who have been supporting the creation of this community. Importantly, I'd like to share that we'll be organizing other forums. Some of them will be specific sessions on specific themes. This is in response to the questions that have come to us by the members of the community of practice. And we'll also be trying to target some of these sessions specific to languages based on the request that comes through, so French and Arabic, or as the demand suggests. We want to emphasize that it's a place to share. As you've seen, we've created in the chat box, we share the resources that we've compiled, and that's compiled by MESA, but it's thanks to the effort of all the experts who are actually contributing to the compilation and to the creation of all of this. So if there's anyone out there who'd like to share with us, please feel free to reach out to us through our email address. You can also follow us with the MESA newsletter to know what's happening. And we are really pleased to be hosting this and to be having so many great experts volunteering and generously sharing and providing information and resources to people in the community, really. So thank you all very much. Deus, I don't know if you want to have a last word, and then we can call the forum to an end.
Thank you so much. Gracias. Asanteni. Merci beaucoup. See you next time.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.